most powerful rampage for attracting a relationship, Attract Love Rampage. Powerful introduction right now. Something is changing inside you, and you can feel it even before you fully understand it. This is not another message about hoping for love or waiting for the right person. This is the moment you stop identifying as someone who is searching and start recognizing yourself as someone who is already chosen. Because love is not coming to you from a place of lack. It is responding to the version of you that already exists in certainty. And from this moment, you are no longer the person wondering if love will happen. You are the person who knows it is already unfolding, already aligning, already becoming physical reality. There is no desperation here, no waiting, no chasing. Only assumption, only identity, only certainty. You are not trying to attract love anymore. You are becoming the version of you that love naturally finds. And once that identity locks in, everything begins to rearrange itself around it. Your self-concept is the foundation of the relationship. You receive everything in your romantic life begins with one invisible but extremely powerful force. Your self-concept. Not your appearance, not your past experiences, not even the actions of other people, but the way you define yourself in love. This internal identity silently decides what you accept, what you tolerate, what you attract, and what you believe is even possible for you. If you see yourself as someone who is almost chosen, you will experience almost love. If you see yourself as someone who is difficult to love, you will meet people who reflect that belief back to you. And if you see yourself as someone who is already loved, already valued, already important, then your entire reality begins to reorganize around that assumption. This is not wishful thinking. It is psychological and energetic alignment. Your outer world always becomes a mirror of your inner identity. So the real question is not, when will love come, but who do I believe I am in love right now? Most people try to change their relationship situation without changing their self-concept. They try to fix the external while the internal script remains the same. They hope a new person will heal old beliefs, or that someone will finally prove their worth. But love cannot permanently stay where the identity does not support it. If deep inside you feel replaceable, you will attract inconsistent attention. If you feel unworthy, you will attract people who mirror that uncertainty. And if you feel powerful, desirable, and emotionally secure, you will naturally draw in experiences that match that level of certainty. This is why self-concept is not just a concept. It is the operating system of your romantic reality. Every interaction you have is filtered through it. Every message you receive is interpreted through it. Even silence is given meaning based on it. Now understand this clearly. You are always in a relationship with yourself before you are in a relationship with anyone else. The way you talk to yourself about love becomes the standard others unconsciously respond to. If your inner dialogue says, "I hope they don't leave me," your energy carries fear. If your inner dialogue says, "I am always chosen," your energy carries certainty. People do not just respond to what you say, they respond to what you assume to be true. And assumption is always stronger than words. You can act confident while thinking you are not enough, but your results will still reflect the hidden belief. That is why changing your life does not begin with changing others. It begins with changing the identity you consistently embody. When you start to upgrade your self-concept, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop overanalyzing every sign. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop interpreting distance as rejection. Instead, you begin to see yourself as the constant in your romantic reality, the stable source of value, not the person trying to earn it. This shift is not about arrogance, it is about emotional grounding. You no longer abandon yourself internally just because someone else is inconsistent externally. You remain anchored in the belief that you are worthy of steady, reciprocal, and meaningful love. And that inner stability changes everything about how you show up in the world. Because here is the truth. You cannot consistently receive a love you do not believe you are. If your identity says, "I am the one who gets left," then even good connections will feel unstable. But if your identity says, "I am the one who is chosen and valued," then even small interactions begin to reflect that belief. Your standards rise naturally. your reactions calm down, your expectations stabilize. And in that state, you become magnetic, not because you are trying to attract, but because you are no longer leaking uncertainty. Self-concept is not changed in one moment. It is reinforced through repetition. The way you think about yourself in love every single day either strengthens your old identity or builds a new one. Every thought like, they won't care about me, reinforces lack. Every thought like, I am worthy of consistent love, reinforces alignment. Over time, these thoughts become emotional habits, and emotional habits become lived reality. That is why transformation is not about forcing outcomes. It is about consistently embodying a new inner narrative until it becomes your dominant state. So from this point forward, your focus is not on chasing love outside of you. Your focus is on becoming someone who naturally expects love to be steady, mutual, and real. You begin to identify as someone who is not confused in relationships, not uncertain about their value, and not available for inconsistency. You become someone who is emotionally anchored in self-worth. And when that identity becomes dominant, love does not have to be forced. It begins to match you effortlessly, because the world does not respond to what you want. It responds to who you are being. Assume the feeling of already being loved. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your entire romantic reality is learning how to assume the feeling of already being loved. Not someday, not in the future, not when the right person finally arrives, but right now, as a lived internal state. Because love is not only an external event that happens between two people, it is first an emotional condition that you enter and stabilize within yourself. Most people delay that feeling. They say, I will feel loved when someone chooses me, or I will feel secure when I receive proof. But that delay keeps them locked in a loop of waiting, and waiting always reinforces lack. What changes everything is the decision to feel it first, without external permission, without visible confirmation, and without needing circumstances to validate it. When you assume the feeling of being loved, you stop reacting from emptiness and start operating from fulfillment, and that shift alone transforms the kind of experiences you attract. To assume the feeling of already being loved means you begin to emotionally live as if love is already present in your reality. You do not force someone to appear, and you do not fake situations in your mind. Instead, you cultivate the inner emotional tone of being valued, chosen, and emotionally secure. This is subtle but extremely powerful. For example, instead of thinking, I hope they love me, you begin to feel, I am already loved. Instead of feeling anxious about where things are going, you settle into the sensation that love is already established in your life. That feeling changes your nervous system, your behavior, your energy, and even your interpretation of events. You no longer read neutral situations as rejection. You no longer spiral into uncertainty when there is silence. Because internally, you are no longer searching for proof. You are embodying certainty. This is where most people underestimate the process. They think love is attracted only by action, effort, or external strategy. But in reality, love responds most strongly to emotional state. When your dominant feeling is lack, you unconsciously signal neediness, fear, and dependency. But when your dominant feeling is already being loved, you signal emotional wholeness, stability, and self-assurance. And people are naturally drawn to emotional stability. They respond to it. They feel it without you having to say anything. Your presence alone begins to carry a different weight, a different calmness, a different magnetic quality. You are no longer trying to get something from someone. You are simply expressing a state that already exists within you. Assuming the feeling of being loved also changes the way you treat yourself. You begin to move differently. You speak to yourself more gently. You stop abandoning your own emotional needs just to chase external validation. Because when you feel loved internally, you stop negotiating your worth externally. You do not tolerate confusion as easily. Do not chase inconsistency. You do not overinvest in situations that are unstable. Instead, you begin to align only with what matches your internal state. And this alignment is crucial because your external reality cannot stabilize if your internal state is chaotic. The feeling must come first, and everything else follows. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. especially if your past experiences were filled with inconsistency or emotional uncertainty. But you are not trying to recreate your past, you are choosing a new internal state. And repetition is what makes it real. The more you return to the feeling of being loved, the more natural it becomes. It stops feeling like imagination and starts feeling like identity. You are no longer pretending, you are embodying. And embodiment is what shifts reality. Not effort, not desperation, not overthinking, but embodiment. As you continue to assume this feeling, you will notice something interesting happening in your external world. The urgency begins to fade. The emotional spikes begin to calm down. You stop obsessing over signs and timing, and instead, you begin to move through your life with a quiet confidence, a grounded expectation that love is not something you are chasing, it is something you are already in alignment with. This is where manifestation becomes effortless, because you are no longer trying to pull love toward you from a place of lack. You are radiating love from a place of fulfillment, and from this state, relationships begin to shift. The people who are not aligned with your emotional stability naturally fall away. The situations that were based on confusion lose their power, and what remains is clarity, consistency, and mutual recognition. Not because you forced it, but because your internal feeling changed first. The world always reorganizes itself around the dominant feeling you sustain. So the practice is simple but profound. Return again and again to the feeling of being already loved. Not as a hope, not as a wish, but as a decision. Let it become your emotional baseline. Let it become the place you operate from. Because once you truly assume that feeling and stabilize it within yourself, love is no longer something you are waiting for. It becomes something you are expressing. Inner conversations shape outer reality. One of the most overlooked but powerful forces in your romantic life is not what other people say to you. It is what you consistently say to yourself. Your inner conversations are not just thoughts passing through your mind, they are instructions you are giving to your subconscious identity. And over time, they become the blueprint your external reality follows. Every assumption you repeat internally about love, about relationships, about your worth, and about how people treat you is being recorded and accepted as truth by your inner mind. And once it is accepted as truth, it begins to shape how you behave, how you respond, what you expect, and ultimately what you attract. This is why inner dialogue is not something casual, it is creative power in motion. Most people focus on changing circumstances while continuing to repeat the same internal script of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But you cannot build a new romantic reality on an old mental conversation. If your inner voice keeps saying, I am not chosen, I always get ignored, or love never stays, then even when something good appears, your mind will distort it, question it, or eventually recreate the same ending. Your inner conversations act like a silent narrator of your life. When a message is delayed, what does your mind say? When someone seems distant, what story do you tell yourself? When there is silence, what meaning do you assign to it? These small internal interpretations are not harmless. They are shaping your emotional frequency in real time. If your inner dialogue leans toward insecurity, your emotional state will reflect that insecurity, and your behavior will unconsciously align with it. You may overthink, overanalyze, or seek reassurance without realizing that the real source of the discomfort is the internal conversation running in the background. But when your inner dialogue shifts to stability, when you begin to tell yourself, I am valued, I am chosen, I am secure in love, your emotional responses begin to stabilize as well. You no longer spiral from minor triggers because your internal narration is no longer feeding fear. Instead, it is feeding certainty. This is why transformation in relationships begins in silence, in the private space of your own thoughts. No one else can hear your inner conversations, but everything in your experience is responding to them. You can think of your mind as a continuous conversation between your current identity and your desired identity. The question is, which voice are you allowing to dominate? The voice of lack that repeats old patterns, or the voice of assumption that builds a new reality? Every time you consciously interrupt a negative inner conversation and replace it with an aligned one, You are not just thinking differently, you are rewriting your emotional conditioning. For example, when your mind says, they don't care about me, and you consciously shift to, I am chosen and valued in love, you are not lying to yourself. You are redirecting your identity. You are choosing which version of yourself gets to lead. Over time, these inner conversations become automatic. What once required effort becomes natural. You stop defaulting to anxiety and start defaulting to certainty. And this is where true change begins to show externally. Because when your internal narrative changes, your emotional reactions change. And when your emotional reactions change, your behavior changes. And when your behavior changes, your experiences change. It is a chain reaction that starts from within and unfolds outward. You may notice that you respond less impulsively, that you feel less emotionally dependent, and that you begin to hold yourself with more respect in relationships. This is not because someone externally changed you. It is because your internal conversation evolved. Your inner dialogue also determines your standards. If your internal voice constantly reinforces lack, you will unconsciously accept less than you deserve. You may tolerate inconsistency, mixed signals, or emotional uncertainty because your inner conversation has normalized it. But when your inner conversation shifts to self-worth and emotional security, your standards naturally rise. You no longer debate whether someone's inconsistent behavior is acceptable. You simply recognize that it does not align with your identity anymore. This is not force, it is alignment. You are no longer negotiating your worth in your mind. You are affirming it. And perhaps the most important realization is this: your inner conversations are happening all day, every day, whether you are aware of them or not. So the real power is not in trying to stop thinking, but in becoming conscious of what you are repeatedly affirming to yourself. Because repetition creates belief, and belief creates experience. When you begin to deliberately shape your inner dialogue around love, stability, and worthiness, you are no longer waiting for reality to change. You are actively instructing it to change through your identity. So, from this point forward, your inner conversation becomes intentional. You no longer allow your mind to narrate rejection stories without challenge. You no longer accept fear-based assumptions as truth. Instead, you step into the role of the observer and the creator of your thoughts. You choose the version of the conversation that aligns with the love you desire to experience. And as you maintain this discipline, something powerful happens. Your inner world becomes so stable that your outer world has no choice but to reflect it. Detachment is confidence in fulfillment. One of the most misunderstood ideas in attracting love is detachment. Many people think detachment means not caring, shutting down emotions, or pretending they do not want love. But true detachment is not emotional absence, it is emotional confidence. It is the deep inner knowing that what is meant for you is already in motion, already aligned, and already unfolding, without the need for desperation, control, or constant mental pressure. Detachment is what happens when desire is no longer mixed with fear. It is when you can want love deeply, but still remain internally steady, because your sense of worth and fulfillment is no longer dependent on immediate external proof. In this state, you are not chasing love, you are trusting it. When you are attached in an unhealthy way, your energy is rooted in anxiety. You are constantly checking, analyzing, waiting, and overthinking. Every delay feels like rejection. Every silence feels like loss. Every small change in behavior feels like danger. This emotional dependency creates instability within you, and that instability becomes part of the energy you bring into relationships. You may not realize it, but attachment often pushes love away because it is driven by fear rather than confidence. It communicates, I need this to feel okay, instead of, I am already okay. And that difference changes everything. Because people are not only responding to your presence, they are responding to your emotional state beneath your actions. Detachment, on the other hand, brings you back to emotional center. It does not remove desire, it removes desperation. You still value love, you still appreciate connection, and you still desire intimacy, but you are no longer emotionally collapsing when things are not immediately visible. Instead, you begin to trust the process of unfolding. You understand that what is aligned with you cannot miss you, and what is meant for you does not require force. This shift allows you to step out of the mental loop of where is it? When will it happen? What if it doesn't happen? And enter a more grounded state of it is already on its way. I do not need to chase what is already aligned with me. This confidence in fulfillment is the core of detachment. It is not indifference, it is certainty. And certainty is one of the most attractive emotional states a person can embody. When you are certain, you are not easily shaken by external uncertainty. You do not change your entire emotional state based on someone's temporary distance or silence. You remain anchored. This emotional anchoring creates a powerful shift in your romantic energy because now you are no longer available for unstable dynamics. You no longer overinvest in inconsistent behavior. You no longer interpret every gap as abandonment. Instead, you interpret life through the lens of trust rather than fear. Detachment also changes your perception of timing. Instead of feeling like something is late or missing, you begin to trust that everything unfolds in alignment with your internal state. You stop pressuring outcomes to happen immediately and instead allow them to develop naturally. This does not mean passivity, it means alignment. You continue living your life, focusing on your emotional stability and maintaining your self-worth regardless of external movement. And ironically, this is often when movement begins to appear externally, because your energy is no longer interfering with the natural flow of connection. When you are deeply attached, you often try to control outcomes through overthinking or emotional urgency. But control is actually a response to insecurity. It is the mind's attempt to manage uncertainty. Detachment dissolves that need for control because it replaces uncertainty with trust. You are no longer trying to force someone to behave a certain way or prove something at a certain time. Instead, you are anchored in the belief that what is truly aligned will naturally reveal itself. This allows relationships to unfold without pressure, without anxiety, and without emotional distortion. And most importantly, detachment protects your self-concept. When you are attached, your sense of worth becomes tied to external behavior. If someone responds, you feel worthy. If they do not, you feel unworthy. But when you are detached in a healthy way, your worth remains stable regardless of external conditions. You are no longer emotionally outsourcing your identity to someone else's actions. You remain grounded in your own value. And this is where true magnetic energy emerges, not from neediness, but from stability. So detachment is not about caring less. It is about trusting more. It is about standing in emotional confidence so strong that you no longer require constant reassurance from the outside world. It is knowing that love, when aligned, does not need to be forced. It flows naturally. And when you embody that state, you stop chasing love and instead, you become someone love naturally moves toward. Consistency in assumption creates. Inevitability, one of the deepest truths about attracting love, is that it is not a single thought, a single affirmation, or a single emotional high that changes your reality. It is consistency. What you repeatedly assume about yourself and about love becomes your dominant state, and your dominant state becomes your lived experience. This is why so many people feel temporary shifts but no lasting change. They momentarily feel confident, they momentarily feel loved, they momentarily feel aligned, but they do not sustain it. And without consistency, the subconscious mind never fully accepts the new identity as reality. It remains a temporary emotion instead of a permanent belief. But when an assumption is repeated often enough, it stops being something you are trying to believe and becomes something you naturally expect. And expectation is what turns possibility into inevitability. Consistency in assumption means that even when external circumstances do not immediately reflect your desire, you do not abandon your internal state. You do not collapse back into old patterns of doubt. You do not let temporary silence, distance, or uncertainty rewrite your identity. Instead, you stay aligned with the version of you who is already loved, already chosen, already in a stable and fulfilling relationship experience. This is where real transformation happens, not in moments of emotional intensity, but in moments of emotional discipline. Anyone can feel confident for a few minutes, but not everyone can remain confident when nothing in the physical world seems to confirm it yet. And yet, it is exactly that consistency that builds inevitability. Think of your assumption as a seed. A seed does not become a tree instantly. It does not grow based on occasional attention. It grows through consistent conditions: water, soil, time, and stability. In the same way, your romantic reality grows from the assumptions you repeatedly return to. If you plant the seed of "I am loved," but then repeatedly water it with doubt, fear, and contradiction, the growth becomes unstable. But if you consistently reinforce the feeling and belief of being loved, even when there is no immediate evidence, that assumption begins to root deeply in your subconscious mind. And once it is rooted, it begins to express itself naturally in your behavior, your expectations, and your interactions with others. Consistency also reshapes your identity at a very subtle level. At first, you may consciously repeat affirmations like "I am chosen" or "I am in a loving relationship." But over time, if you stay consistent, these statements stop feeling like something you are trying to convince yourself of and start feeling like something you already know. This shift from effort to identity is critical because manifestation is not about forcing belief. It is about becoming the person who naturally lives from that belief. When you are consistent, you slowly transition from "I am trying to attract love" into "I am someone who is already loved." And that identity shift is what the external world responds to. Without consistency, your emotional state becomes unstable, and instability produces mixed signals in your energy. One day you feel worthy, the next day you feel doubtful. One moment you feel secure, the next moment you feel anxious. This inconsistency keeps your reality fluctuating because your internal foundation is not solid. But when your assumption becomes consistent, your emotional baseline stabilizes. You are no longer emotionally reactive to every small external change. Instead, you remain anchored in your chosen identity. This stability is powerful because it signals to your subconscious mind that this new belief is not temporary. It is your new normal. Consistency also creates momentum. At first, changing your inner world feels intentional and sometimes effortful. But with repetition, it becomes automatic. Your mind begins to default to the new assumption without you forcing it. You start naturally thinking, "I am chosen," instead of "what if I am not enough?" You start naturally expecting love to up in aligned ways, instead of fearing abandonment or inconsistency. And once this momentum builds, your external experiences begin to align more quickly because your internal state is no longer fluctuating. It is steady, focused, and aligned. This is where inevitability is born. When an assumption is no longer questioned internally, when it is no longer debated or doubted, but instead fully accepted through repetition, it becomes your reality blueprint. You are no longer hoping for love, you are expecting it. You are no longer trying to become worthy, you are living as someone who already is. And when that level of inner certainty is maintained consistently, external reality has no choice but to reorganize around it. So the real power is not in dramatic emotional breakthroughs, but in daily mental discipline. Every time you choose your aligned assumption over doubt, you are strengthening the new identity.